Hello and welcome to Media7, I'm Russell Brown. Now, of all the screen forms, documentary is the one that weathers. Well-told stories about us will be as compelling in 50 years as they are now, perhaps more so. Then perhaps it should worry us that in 2012 documentaries are hard to fund and even harder to get on screen. Yet it's not so long ago that documentary strands not only commanded a place in TV schedules, they justified that place with their ratings. We'll talk about what's happened and what should happen in this show. Sam Mulgrew gets us rolling.
The atrophy of New Zealand's proud documentary culture has seen talented doco makers and their worthy stories lose favour in the mainstream.
I'll probably get up at 10 o'clock, then I'll probably go out for a cigarette and probably sit down and watch a bit of TV.
These days, bigwig TV execs prefer podge, princesses, incontinence or just space fillers to real documentary.
You have to ensure the hair.
Louis ensured his bum.
His bum.
But some people believe the genre, which documents New Zealand's people, our very way of life, is worth looking after. For 8 years, the Documentary Edge Festival, which runs till June 3rd with 72 titles, has aimed to nurture and promote documentary, getting them up on the big screen. Last year, New Zealand On Air dedicated $12 million to television docos. On average, we watch nearly 3.5 hours of TV per day, but documentaries increasingly find themselves in the 1 a.m. slot of the TV guide.
I smack him with a paddle.
This week, just 15 documentaries are on free-to-air in the prime time. 10 of those are on TVNZ7, which is heading to the boneyard. It's hoped that by celebrating documentary, it'll be looked after, and that so-called reality doesn't infiltrate its borders.
Well, that was a cheery little number, wasn't it? Sam Mulgrew there. I'm joined now by the co-director of the Documentary Edge Festival, Alex Lee, documentary producer, director and writer, Annie Goldson, and James Muir, the director of the award-winning Riverdog. Welcome to you all.
Well, thank you.
Now, Alex, as well as putting on, I think, 50 films, is it, you have a forum running alongside the festival, including a session looking at the funding of documentaries. What, in your view, is the problem there?
Well, from our view, every year we get submissions and we're a bit concerned with the number of documentaries coming through. And we're also concerned with the number of well-funded, what we consider to be good production value documentaries. As compared to other countries around the world, we certainly feel that there is a declining number, and I think a lot of that's got to do with the lack of funding and support for the development of documentary.
And that session itself is called Mind the Gap, which suggests that documentaries are falling through the cracks.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason why we decided to put on the session is because we are concerned that if we don't do something about it, that we're going to slip behind a lot of other countries. And that maybe the best way to go about doing this is to bring people like New Zealand Air, New Zealand Film Commission, the broadcasters, production companies, in a convivial atmosphere. You know, we can talk about how bad it is, but I think what's important is try to find ways and means of actually solving the problem. And that's what we're attempting to do.
You talked about other countries there, so the implication is that documentaries are well and healthy in other territories.
I think documentaries are significantly healthier than in New Zealand. If you take countries like Canada, Australia, you look at Israel, you look at Norway, documentaries are being produced in good numbers and of good quality. And around Asia at the moment, in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of money being pumped into documentary because they see that that's a genre, a particular type of media that needs to be protected.
Whose money is it?
It's government money. It is.
That's the big difference. Is that the big difference to you, Annie?
Well, I think so. I mean, one can always whinge and moan, and filmmakers and documentary filmmakers are quite good at that, but I think the broader perspective is the economic rationale and the rationalisation, the increasing commercialisation of broadcasting culture. And I've worked very happily and had support from some really great people within the system, but I think we're all swimming in the same pool of increasing commercialisation. And to me, it's a bit like watching the top 10 over and listening to the top 10 over and over and over again. I mean, increasingly programs seems to be averse to risk-taking. There's very little controversy. There's very little formal experimentation. And okay, some of that work might be a little riskier, but you have to kind of do that if you are going to continue documentary practice or any other audiovisual practice.
Well, you do
in fact.
continue to practice.
I do.
In fact, I get the impression there's never a time when you're not making a documentary.
No, well, I sort of feel a bit like that too, and I have been blessed in that way, and there are some really great people in the funding agencies. So,
well, should we have a look at the one you've got out there on screens at the moment, Brother Number One?
This is the story of an innocent man brought to his knees and killed in the prime of his life.
2 million Cambodians died during the regime of starvation, overwork and execution.
I've been invited to give what is called a victim statement at the War Crimes Tribunal. I walked in and here he is, the man who killed my brother. The more I hear about some of the things that happened, the more understanding of what took place there. And I want to forgive, but the harder it will be to forgive. And sometimes I feel a real hatred towards him.
Well, Annie, that's a New Zealand story, but it's set in Cambodia. That can't be cheap. How did you fund this?
I got support from TV3 and New Zealand On Air through the TV3 licence, and also the Film Commission as well. So I was very lucky in that regard. I think because it is quite a big story, and Rob, I think, is a very strong character, I thought it would work on the big screen, so we sort of took a punt.
What about the other side of it? What's the revenue part of this?
Oh, look, you never go into this sort of filmmaking for money. It's very, very difficult. And there are many fine documentary makers in New Zealand, I have to say, and we compete quite well on the international stage. But even with good sales and good sales agents, it's still quite difficult to even return money to investors, and that's just the reality of making documentary. So you have to be pretty passionate to do it, and, you know, they turn up everywhere.
Well, I'll ask you later on why not just give it away, but we'll get to that. James, with Riverdog, you've come straight out of university and made a film that's been seen in 14 countries and won awards. How did you put that together? How did you make that work?
I think the key to it was making a story that was close to my heart, something that I knew really, really well already. So I went into it with about 3 or 4 years of understanding the story, knowing it very, very well. I wasn't even going to make it, and I was going to go to Australia and make a film in Australia with my filmmaking partner Oscar Hunter, who helped me make Riverdog. And I sat down with my flatmate one day and I said to her, look, there's this story. It's about this guy and he lives on this river and he's been threatened to be killed. He's been, his farm is being polluted. He's trying to save this river from the pollution, which is continuing to this day. And he goes down there every day with his dogs and he patrols this river and chases the stock off it. And she just sat there and said, that's this film that you have to make. You have to make that film. And then I said to her, that's my dad.
Well, I mean, what else can I do? All I can do is go down to the river twice a day with my dogs and chase these mongrels cattle off the river. You know, this area is a classic case of what is happening in the backcountry of New Zealand, where you have a small minority of farmers that don't give a shit about the environment. They're only interested in themselves. They're only interested in how much money they can make. And they are destroying the environment. They are so short-sighted. They are destroying their environment, the environment that they live and farm in.
How did you end up making the film that way? Was that what you wanted to make?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an experiment in documentary filmmaking. It's my first documentary, but I decided that I didn't want to make a film I'm a keen environmentalist, and I'd watched other environmental films, and I found that they made me feel guilty. They made me feel very guilty about being a human, and they made me feel very kind of bad about the things that I was doing in my life. So I thought there's got to be a better way to tell stories and to make people engage with an issue in a better way. And so when we set out to make this film, we were encouraged by everybody, except for ourselves, to make a documentary that was current affairs, that exposed the corruption in the council, that told the story from all the different sides and had all the voices in it. And Oscar and I we were both of us were in the same place, and neither of us wanted to make that documentary. We wanted to make a piece of poetry, and we thought that we could make an issue-based documentary that was poetic and had a very cinematic form to it, and we set out to do it.
Was that what appealed to you, Alex? Because you chose it for the festival.
Yes.
That it looked cinematic. It didn't look like current affairs.
We chose it because it's a good piece of storytelling. At the end, you know, in any documentary, you want to have a good story. It made you think. It gave you reason to consider what it is that the filmmaker wanted you to think about and consider to be an important part of the actual story. I think James did that really well. And it was cinematic, obviously, so it made a big difference.
Was it a lack of those cinematic qualities that led you to only choose 5 New Zealand films for the festival?
I think the big problem that we have in New Zealand is that the lack of films that we were seeing is that there's a lack of funding, and a lot of people are not making the independent one-off films that we would like to see. There's nothing wrong with TV documentaries, but by and large we don't see a lot of TV documentaries come to our festival, so we're relying mainly on short films as well as cinematic feature films. And the feature films are just not coming because people are not being funded to it. Whether it's the New Zealand Film Commission, they're not funding it, and independent filmmakers have to hock their house or mortgage their properties to be able to do that, and not many people can do that these days.
Annie, you have made your kind of film for TV before, most notably with Georgie Girl, about Georgina Bio, which won awards and was extremely successful. Those kinds of documentaries aren't appearing on TV anymore. You're not making them. What changed? Did TV change, or did you?
I am. I mean, I'm the queen of reversioning, actually, because every time you make a film now for the international marketplace, you do usually have a cinema release, you know, a film festival release. You reversion it for international broadcast, which I have to say is 56 minutes as opposed to our 44 minutes because we have so many commercials. But most filmmakers I know do definitely reversion because that's the market demands, and it is to maximise exposure. I mean, I think television is a great medium. You know, I think it's fantastic. It's beamed in. I mean, I love cinema too, but I think the fact that, you know, television is in the home and can reach so many people, it's just, you know, as a medium, it's fantastic.
Well, we'll take a break now, and when we come back, we will talk a little more about the practicalities of getting on different screens.